Yes, they do agree with the resumption of physical school on April 19th across Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, you can continue to vote on this poll throughout the day, throughout programming, and we give you the final results tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow morning, on Thursday morning, because tomorrow is a holiday.
First one for the year. All right, so let's introduce our guest this morning. We have Mr. Ceron Richards. Good morning to you, Ceron. How you doing?
Yeah, good morning to you and good morning to your listeners, viewers.
All right, of course. Once again, welcome to the Paul Breakfast Show. You're seeing the man who has the best face for radio, Paul Richards. Also, the best face for radio, again, Richard Ragoobarsingh.
Yeah,
Good morning, Ceron. How are you going? Everything's all right?
I'm okay. Paul, how are you going?
I'm good. Good to see you. I know you also would have had your memories of blacks. Care to chime in?
Yeah, that's so tragic. That's so tragic. We just losing our icons, you know. And I think over the last few years, we lost quite a few icons. We lost blacks, and a number of them. So it's always something to reflect on, you know, the kind of the joy they spread and how they make you feel over the years.
Yeah, I know.
Blacks will certainly be missed. I can tell you that.
Juice Man must be in a mess because he was very close to singing Sandra also.
That's
and
correct.
He's the musical director of All Stars, so I know he must be just inconsolable this time, having lost two of his close friends. And
I know also blacks connected with the younger folks and the older folks, so it really he'll be missed in a more widespread way, because all younger folks in Trinidad today can identify with blacks and his music and the joy that he brought, you know, to the lives of people. But
yeah, absolutely.
The Almighty had it to be so what can we do?
We have his music. We celebrate him and continue to enjoy his music. All right, our substantive topic, of course, is national security and the prison service. We had another prison break recently. And I know when the past minister, or the previous minister, I should say, of national security, when it was Stuart Young, there were quite a number of promises and assurances given to the members of the Prison Officers Association with you as the president, including also the issue of the safety of prison officers. Let's start with the issue of the prison break. Were you surprised?
Well, I mean, to start with, Paul, wherever there is a prison, there will be prison breaks. And I just want persons to know that. I want the people to know that once you have prison establishment, you will have prison breaks.
You know, I can counter that. I know of prisons around the world where there are no prison breaks.
Yeah,
so I can easily counter that.
At some point in time, Paul.
There are some prisons around the world where there have never been prison breaks.
Yes, Paul, and there will be exceptions to the rules. Mm-hmm. But in a general sense, where there are prisons, there will be prison breaks, attempts at prison breaks and so on. But in our circumstance, I believe a lot could have been avoided had we implement all the things that we needed to implement, or had we updated infrastructure and do all the things that are necessary to prevent or to heighten security and to prevent. We really need to update our prisons. And I say update in all sense of the word update, not just the physical infrastructure, but also employ technology to assist with the maintenance of security. I know a number of initiatives that have been taken over the years, few and far between, but in a general sense, these things happen way too slow. Yeah. It happened way too slow. We would have been complaining and begging over the years. Why, when Ian Allen airs on TV or on online or whatever, every break-in of a house or of a shop or a jewelry store or any business establishment is always followed by CCTV that's showing exactly what happened. But do you know we have the highest security environment in the country? And we don't have CCTVs throughout. Why should we not have CCTVs to show us exactly what happened in that break?
You know, Ceron,
and all these things over the years.
I hear you, and we've had these conversations with you before, and it is amazing. I don't know, it's like the time moves at a different pace outside the prison, and in the prison service, it's like time slows down. Everything takes years and years to accomplish. these conversations about improving the situation at remand, where you have a lot of your possible volatile prisoners in the remand section, the issue of the conditions in remand, the issue of CCTV cameras, the issue of not being able to use cell phones and jammers, all of these kinds of conversations have been conversations we've had over the years on this program. And yet here we are back in 2022, and it's still basically almost the same conversation. It's incredulous.
Well, and that's the problem. Then lies the problem. Prison doesn't really occupy any real sense of priority in the whole totem pole. And that's why we always make the point that we are at the bottom of the barrel.
But how can that be? You described it perfectly earlier on by saying it is arguably the highest security risk environment in the country, where you are housing 3,500 remandees, and in the maximum security, of course, it's the lifers, as they call them. How can the prison not be a priority?
Well, that is not a question for me to answer. I mean, we make it a priority. We always come on the airwaves, on the audiovisual media and so on, and talk about the issues, argue about the issues, have meetings with our stakeholders, treat with the issues. So it's a matter for the other stakeholders to answer that question. I don't know. Maybe prison do not, and that is a talk that you would have heard over and over the years. Prison doesn't really bring in any revenue or substantial revenue to the coffers of the state, and other agencies do. So on the basis of that, they don't feel prison should get all that priority in terms of spending. The other hypothesis is that prison house criminals, persons who did society wrong, and there's no real motivation by society through the government, of course, to really pay any meaningful emphasis on the prisons. But when something happens, everybody cry out, everybody asks the question, why this happening? Why that happening? How, where, who allowed that to happen? But I'll tell you who allowed it. The neglect over the years is facilitating a lot of things that are going wrong in the prison service. Yes, I want to applaud the government under Keith Rowley for doing over the remand, because at the end of the day, the remand prison Golan Grove is now being refurbished and re-outfitted and so on. Thanks for all those years of begging. The government finally answered the call on that. But development in the prison is happening again, as I mentioned, way too slow. And prison is prone for incidents. There's no if, but, or maybe. When you don't have the correct infrastructure, the correct security measures, you will get issues in a prison service. You will get issues. Persons are held against their will. Persons who are inclined to be deviant, who may have committed infractions against good order and discipline in your country are the ones that are being held there under those types of conditions. And you have a situation where the courts, the judiciary in Trinidad and Tobago, in my view, I describe it as the mother of all evils, Paul. It is largely dysfunctional, and it is not delivering justice on time. Persons are spending years in prison without a trial being concluded. I mean, that when you put all these things in the pot, you have an environment that is ripe and prone for problems. So we will continue doing our job. We'll continue crying out. My office, as president of the Prison Officers Association, will continue advocating, continue highlighting the issues, and continue pointing fingers where fingers need to be pointed as well. But we need to do better. We need to do better. I'm employing the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I know that you all are doing some work at the remand prison, and we applaud you for that. We are asking you humbly to double and triple the efforts, because that concoction that exists within the prison environment, coupled with the fact that over the years, we haven't really updated our infrastructure in any substantial way, is ripe for problems. And it will continue to yield problems. The other thing that I did mention in other programs, we are not focusing on areas that we need to focus. We have contracts being given to persons amounting to millions of dollars to deliver services that we don't need. We don't need, and I dare call that hemorrhaging of state funds. I dare call it hemorrhaging. Because
what kind of services are you talking about? Give us an example.
About security services to move inmates from point A to point B. We have millions of dollars. And the reason why I keep talking about that project, over the years, and Paul, you will be a witness to that, is because the amount of monies being spent or allocated to that service, that is not bringing any real return on it of investment.
You're talking about justice on time?
That's correct. It is not bringing any real tangible return on investment that we can say, well, look at it, we're going to build and develop this service. I said that is a way of hemorrhaging.
What part of that service are you talking about? Because justice on time takes inmates from the prison to the courts. We haven't had physical courts for a while. We're not resuming physical courts.
No, we don't have physical court for a while, but it is continue unabated internally, moving inmates from one building to another building inside the prison compound, and large amounts of monies are still being charged.
So I wanted confirmation on this because I've heard this story before, and added to that, I understand there's a building that has been under construction for court services, virtual court services on the compound. Is that building completed?
For years.
Is it completed?
Years. It is not completed. It started under the last administration, continues under this administration, is yet to be completed. I don't know what is going on. I don't know.
So that, and I understand it's under construction for over 10 years. That's my information.
Over 10 years,
right? And that building is supposed to house the technology so that you have the ability to have virtual court cases for inmates, so that you don't have to transport them from Port of Spain, from Aruca to Port of Spain, etc. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that building is under construction for 10 years. But you just made an interesting point. Why do you, if you have prison officers manning Golden Grove, why do you need justice and time to move inmates from building A to building C?
Because we have over 100 drivers sitting down in a garage doing nothing. Prison service drivers getting paid, doing nothing, because the government of Trinidad and Tobago isn't buying vehicles for them to drive. Over 10 years, we haven't updated our prison fleet. And while we're paying the drivers, which will amount to millions of dollars, we also have to pay a private security company millions of dollars to transport persons to and from video court inside a compound. And the Prison Officers Association, Paul, and again, you all will be our witnesses, we have been asking for vehicles for years. We do not have enough vehicles. We hired drivers just recently. So our driver fleet, I am a prison supervisor at Golden Grove, and I have drivers that I cannot use because there's no vehicles. So you have
no vehicles that are operational inside the prison?
Extremely few.
And justice and time.
And
I brought up this, and I'll make no comments about it.
It's farcical.
I have brought up this issue of justice and time before, and people feel I have an issue with the private company. No, I don't. I have an issue with wastage and contracts being given out where they can't. And I guess there's something we don't understand about the situation, because I asked a question years ago about whether or not the country was seeing savings since we were on lockdown with justice and time. Then Minister of National Security, Stuart, and I want to be accurate, said, yes, there were savings. Now I'm getting confirmation from you, the president of the Officers Association, that justice and time is hired to take prison inmates from building A to building C. I'm just being figurative by the symbology, while there are prison officer drivers on contract who cannot do that job because there are very few vehicles available for them to take prisoners inside the compound.
Absolutely, Paul. That is what is happening, and it is
now,
very amazing.
Tell me.
It is very amazing, and no, I don't know if that is being addressed, but that is something I've been talking about. I've been talking about the wastages of money is public.
I will say it plainly, because everybody afraid to say it. Somebody needs to keep the contract.
Well,
apparently somebody needs to keep the contract, and it's not about value for money for taxpayers in this country. Apparently not.
No, it's not about value
for
money.
Because it's confusing to me.
Well, Paul, it's confusing to me too. It is a phenomenon that is happening, and those monies could have been better spent. If you, for example, One of those payments could have built over all those dormitories, those World War II barracks, those dormitories that those prisoners escaped from. One payment to that security company could have built over all of those.
If the priority is the prisons and the inmates and the officers, if the priority is that.
And that is what I've been saying. So I mean, I think we need to rethink a lot of things that we are doing, and I'm saying we, in the context of the state of Trinidad and Tobago, we need to really rethink what we are doing and try to focus and emphasize on areas that we need to focus on and not waste resources on other areas that we do not need. And that is a primary example of that. But even going forward, a lot of implementations that have been promised over the years are yet to be implemented. It is really frustrating, Paul, to really sit and be in this type of forum over and over, year after year, month after month, year after year, talking about these same things. I mean, I inherited the presidency of the Prison Officers Association from my predecessor, who would have inherited from his predecessor. And I could remember way back in the early 90s, all those times, these are the same things we are talking about.
Have you had any meetings with newly appointed Inspector of Prisons, Mr. Neptune, yet?
No, I haven't met him.
But he installed months ago.
No, I haven't met him, Paul. Right?
But it's astounding that the Inspector of Prisons, whose job is to be an independent arbiter of how the prison is run, I'm paraphrasing here, to make sure that the state has a mechanism by which it can investigate how the prisons are being run, how the officers are doing, how the inmates are doing, the conditions in the prison, the security levels in the prison. And Mr. Neptune has been installed. I remember Minister Hines at a press conference talking about Mr. Neptune's history in the security services, and he hasn't met with you, the president of the association, yet.
Well, it is not, and to be very honest and to be quite frank, we have never met, save and except for Mr. Daniel Khan, we have never met with any inspector of prisons in the past.
Are you not an important stakeholder in the whole scenario?
Well, we would like to think so.
Ceron, is it time for the state to consider? Is it time for the state to consider building an entirely brand new prison that incorporates Port of Spain, Carrera, etc., and of course the facilities at Golden Grove? Has that time arrived, or is it that they merely need to upgrade facilities?
Well, I'm glad you touched on that point. Over the years, we would have been asking for a brand new purpose-built prison facility in Trinidad and Tobago, given the fact that Port of Spain is over 200 years old. Port of Spain is irrelevant to what we want to achieve in our prison service at this point in time. Because remember, Port of Spain prison was built at a time when the state was retributive, and prison was built for retribution, not rehabilitation, reintegration. So there's need for a brand new purpose-built remand facility. And what you're talking about, it cannot be one facility, because you have remanded inmates who have different type of needs to convicted inmates, right? Who we would like to have programs, rehabilitation, reintegration, parole.
But isn't that what Golden Grove is for?
Well,
I mean, maximum security.
Right. Remember, maximum security prison was built and designed as a convicted prison, not a remand prison. Now we're maximum security prison because of the explosion of inmates in our remand yards. It is now being used primarily as a maximum security prison, but that is really a convicted prison. What we need in Trinidad and Tobago, and we asked for that several times, as a matter of fact, there was a project under UDCOT for that realization to take place. That's opposite Golden Grove compound. A new brand purpose-built remand facility where that prison will be built for purpose, so that you can separate and have proper classification of inmates. You can have programs running for those remandees, because largely in our system, remandees are not really exposed to programs. The convicted are exposed, and here is the quagmire. 3/4 of the remand will never see the convicted section. They will go on for over a
But
decade,
added to
almost 2
that,
decades.
well, in the perfect world, that would work, because if a remandee was spending the just time before going to trial, let's say 3 to 5 years, if so much, and not 50, 12, and 15 years, then one would understand why that system could work, because they would be either convicted and go into the convicted part and benefit from rehabilitative and restorative justice programs, as opposed to really basically almost serving life sentences in remand.
With no programs, with no
programs or anything. So ideally, the system is not working because it's messed up.
Well, and
because the justice is back to
That's
front.
correct. That's correct, Paul. Absolutely correct. You couldn't phrase it better. So if that judicial system is addressed and it is delivering what it's supposed to deliver in terms of functionality, then you will have persons passing through the remand, right, for a short period. They'll be exposed to the convicted section, where they will benefit from rehabilitative processes and constructive regimes and so on.
You and I know that, Ceron, you are in the belly of the beast, so to speak. But I could see people listening right now, and I think the politicians know this, that will say, times are hard, and this is a classic case of understanding the society in and working it. Politicians, that is. Them is criminal. My child don't have school a laptop, or my child hungry, and don't spend no money on them because them is criminal.
But Paul, look at
it. And nobody will advocate for that group of people, although we have a supposed civilized society where people are presumed innocent, although incarcerated awaiting trial. Nobody is going to advocate for more money to build a new prison when you have so many needs outside, and that's what the politicians play on. Because at the end of the day,
what is the result of that, Paul? And what is the result of that? What result?
Well, the result of that is over 90% of them will come back out eventually, more hardened, and perpetrate more crimes.
That's correct. And the persons who went in for simple crimes at the remand yard, because of the exposure, the contamination, will come out hardened criminals as well. They will come out with more resources to commit crime. Resources in terms of
well, it's a university. It's a university.
That's correct. So that is that situation and a system that needs to be correct, and it is dysfunctional for far too long. It is dysfunctional.
But Sarah, no matter people's partnership in power, PNM in power, same khaki pants, no pun intended. It doesn't seem to be changing no matter who's in power, because as I said just now, they understand that the society is not going to go up in an uproar for these 4,000 people because they are not a valuable cadre of people in terms of putting resources in parentheses.
Do you know what a politician once told us some years back, Paul, under the last administration, right, which is the People Partnership? The politician was in the Ministry of Justice. Remember the Justice Ministry? A politician told us that they don't have to take us on. We could shout, we could quarrel, we could beg, we could do what we want. We do not shape political will. What the politician was alluding to is that prison officers numbers only 2,000 something personnel. And a general election, you need much more than that to have any real impact on political outcome. So the politicians say, I don't have to take you on. You don't shape political will. I will win
election. Between the 2,000 prison officers and the 4,000 inmates, you're all not big enough to make any dent, so you could shout how much you want.
The politician told us, Paul, it was so amazing when that was told us.
What is sad is people don't realize that what they're seeing in their front yards and people breaking into their houses is partly as a result of this dysfunctional system.
Yeah, because rehabilitation don't work to any real extent. And Paul, I will tell, there's a fallacy that exists now as it regards to rehabilitation. Let me look at convicted section quickly in Trinidad and Tobago. Who is the convicted section composed of? It's really persons who commit minor crimes, persons who are they have drug problems.
Who have a limited time in there. They're not lifers.
That's correct. Persons who come in for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years.
They are going to come back out.
And they're going to come back out. But here's the quagmire in that. They are not really composed of the real hardened criminals, because the real hardened criminals, they stay in the remand yard fighting their cases. fighting to get justice, as they say. So those persons who when they go to court, they plead guilty one time. As a city magistrate, they plead guilty. Those are the persons who are drug sick, who have issues, who are petty thieves, petty crimes, and so on. So the rehabilitation system, the regime, is only targeting those persons because those are the only persons that are being convicted. Whereas the hardened criminals, persons charged for rape, robberies, murders, and so on, extortion, and all these different things, they are packed up in the remand. So rehabilitative regimes don't meet them. They don't meet them. And then they stay there for 10 years, 12 years, and they get more, they create more disdain towards the state. They are more angry than ever because they are saying, okay, maybe I commit the crime, but why should I have to stay here 15 years, 16 years, 17 years? We interviewed inmates who have as much as 18 years waiting for justice. That is the reality.
Wow.
Persons at the preliminary inquiry stage, which is at the magistrate level, who are waiting to see if they have a case fitting enough to go up to their sizes. Those persons are spending 7 years, 6 years, 8 years at the preliminary inquiry stage, Paul.
Well, the state will tell you, well, they can now apply for bail.
Apply for bail. You can apply for bail.
You mentioned something, I'm trying to be fair in the interview. Are there improvements taking place? Because you mentioned the state is investing in some infrastructural improvements. The Minister of National Security mentioned that they were doing some work. What work is being done and how much has been completed?
No, well, at the remand facility, and that is where we have to be fair to the government, at the remand facility Golden Grove, which was our premium remand facility, it is being refurbished at this time. No inmates are housed there at this time. It is being completely refurbished, although in the past we would have opted for, if we had any say, a new brand purpose-built remand facility, but that didn't happen. We are getting the remand prison to be refurbished. I think work are due to be completed within the next 2 to 3 months because they are moving at a pace. I must admit they are moving at a pace. And soon we should be able to have remandees again housed in that facility. What does that work entail? Is it toilet facilities? Is it better cells, etc.? It will have toilet and face basins and so on in their cell, which is a more habitable arrangement for inmates, barring the fact that they would have been living in an extremely inhumane surroundings for some time. So that is a light, some light inside the darkness. But what I'm saying, and I'll continue to say, these things are taking too long to be materialized.
But why should a problem exist? 15 years. You mentioned CCTV cameras earlier on, Ceron, and the lack of enough CCTV cameras. I'm shocked that 5 inmates could plan an escape, raise up some, galvanize in some portion.
Where's the video footage?
Get out 2 perimeter fences, if I remember correctly from my tour. 2 sets of perimeter footage fences, and get outside without some kind of alarm being raised. Why is that such an easy feat to pull off?
Well, given the shortages of officers can be all about at the same time, given the lack of those technological resources that we're always talking about. Which prison, any part of the world, Paul, you tell me, which prison, any part of the world is not outfitted with CCTVs that sees every square inch of that prison? Which prison in this modern world? The reality is a shop, a barber shop, a grocery have more security, CCTV security than the prison. And that is a higher security environment. And I want to say...
Now, I want to ask a question, but I don't want to compromise the security because it will be irresponsible. What sort of deficit... Well, I can't ask you how much cameras they have because that would be a security breach, right? So how many more cameras do you think they need?
Throughout the prison service, Paul, we could only see less than 10%. Less than 10% of what is happening in the prison in the current situation. We need almost 100% consistent with best practice. I visited prisons in Miami, even Jamaica, who happens, and we describe Jamaica as an impoverished state. They were not blessed with the type of resources that we have over the years. But the reality is we visited Jamaica, and Jamaica's parole properly implemented. they have electronic monitoring, and all these things that we like to talk about over the years. Jamaica has better security systems at their prison. We were alarmed, Paul. We were virtually alarmed and jealous.
You are saying less than 10% of the facility is surveilled by CCTV camera. That's shocking.
I'm talking about the entire prison service. I'm not talking about a facility. I'm talking about the entire prison service. Right? That cannot be a sufficient and adequate situation in a prison. That could never be. Because we, the public, should be the beneficiaries of seeing CCTVs as to how security was compromised.
While Justice and Time continues to get the money to transport inmates inside at the Trinidad. I wanna before we end, I wanna talk about how officers are feeling about their own safety. We've had a spate, fortunately none in the past couple of months or weeks, of officers being killed. That horrible, horrible video of that officer who was killed with his child in hand in South Trinidad. And if the threats continue on, and if there have been moves to, well, I know something is coming in the pipeline to make officers feel safer, which I can't speak about, which I'm sure you know is coming legislatively. But
even that legislation, Paul, I believe it should have been, given. I know there are other priorities in Trinidad and Tobago, but I believe that legislation should have been in Parliament already and passed. We believe that
I cannot go into a lot of details, but it is on the agenda for soon.
Okay, I'm happy to hear
that's
that.
For obvious reasons, that's all I can say. It's on the docket for soon. But
no, the minister told me that as well, but right. I still feel it.
But I can't go into details for obvious reasons, right? But in terms of officers, do the threats continue?
Of course, once they're in that prison environment, that is commonplace for threats. The prison environment is commonplace for threats and the carrying out of threats. It has become culture in Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, because we did not put a stopgap measure in the earliest time. We did not do it. I think in the past, the state has responded very slowly, if not responded at all in some instances to that phenomenon. So we hope that the state ups its ante in terms of treating with threats to prison officers and the eventual carrying out of those threats to prison officers and their families.
Are there threats that are deemed imminent? Because I guess there are different levels of threats that officers
there will
face
always be threats that are deemed imminent, and for those threats, some action are being taken internally and to some extent externally. But as a general principle, we don't have the type of implementations that are common to all, that everybody will benefit in the same way, in an equitable way to treat with these things. We don't have powerful legislation that will treat with threats. Well, we have the legislation, but it's the apparatus that will support the implementation of the legislation. Because we have the Litter Act for years, but people is littering all over Trinidad and Tobago because the apparatus to effect the legislation is not there in any significant way. Just like the electronic monitoring. We have that legislation now existing for about 3 years in Trinidad, proclaimed by the president and so on. But the apparatus that give effect to the legislation, they are now trying to work out that and implement after 3 years. So
how much of the issue relates to some of your officers themselves who are facilitating contraband?
Of course, and Paul, we have to admit, we have been weeding out those officers. If you look at it, it's very common to hear the prison officers capture one of these officers. I mean, it is not few and far between. We do it as much as we can. As a matter of fact, I dare say, in Trinidad and Tobago, we heard about a number of organizations being corrupt. We hear about a number of organizations exposed to underhand transactions and so on. We hear it on an everyday basis. But what is different, and you must admit, Paul, the prison service has been cleaning up. We have been doing it, right? It is common to hear a prison officer being brought before the court, a prison officer being held with contraband, because that is indicative and testimony that we have been trying to weed them out. Unlike many organizations over the years, Paul, where we have corruption exists and no one getting caught at all. We are leading by example in that regard. And we'll continue to lead by example, catching those rogue officers, setting up sting operations, and getting them out of the system. That is one area That is one area the association must applaud the prison admin for. The prison admin has been on the ball as in regard to trying to catch officers who are involved in illegal activities and get them out of the system with the association support. That is one area I must admit that the prison administration has been working feverishly on, and we'll continue to support them. We'll continue in our attempt to get these rogue officers out of our system, as we have been doing already. Paul, another area that I want to touch on, and I want this area treated with, it is very common when you go into the maximum security prison, which have a large population of lifers, like persons who are conditioned to life in prison, imprisonment, and so on, right? Life in prison, sorry, and so on. These inmates are crying out for a part of the law they believe a part of their rights that are being violated. Paul, the Mercy Committee is not meeting. It is creating a problem in our system. Persons' records are not getting, the inmates' records are not being evaluated to determine whether or not they can be exposed to conditional release, right? You see, when you have a system operating, your system cannot appear to be dysfunctional or not working the way it's supposed to work for an extended period of time, right? Because it will put persons, it will put inmates at a disadvantage. And it is very common. If I go into the maximum security prison now, I am going to be faced with a barrage of inmates talking about that issue. Even at Golan Grove, where I exist and work, operate as a prison supervisor, I have that issue to deal with. Persons telling me about, Mr. Richards, what about this? What about that? How this ain't working? But who it is seeing about this and that? So this is a situation that I will want attention be shown.
Well, let me ask Richard a question. Is that triggered by the Office of the Attorney General? Just because I think it is.
No,
the Mercy Committee.
The Minister of National Security.
National
Security chairs the Mercy Committee.
But I will tell you that I have had correspondence with Mr. Delzin, Senior Counsel, and Ms. Cummings, who I think are or were part of the Mercy Committee, who are absolutely frustrated trying to do their jobs on that committee.
I don't know what can be done, Paul, but you see, when you have all these issues, coupled with all the issues we talked about previously, you have an environment that is right for adverse situations to occur. And we have to, at some point in time, Paul, I believe the state have to reconnect or connect itself with the value that prison can potentially bring to society. We are disconnected from that. Prison exists for crime prevention. The police service exists for crime suppression. There's a difference between the two, Paul. The mere fact that a police is visible on site will deter persons from committing crime. It doesn't necessarily mean it will take away their criminality or their intent to commit a crime, because from the time the police leave the area, crime will be committed. Prison, on the other hand, is where there exists the long-term treatment for crime. So that is where you have the persons coming in and you try to attend to the criminogenic nature of them, to treat with causing the person to change, make meaningful changes in their lives, so that when they go back out of society, it wouldn't be about deterring them from committing a crime anymore. They don't longer have the internal drive or the desire to commit crime. So that is where you have your resources supposed to accumulate to weed out your criminals, to change their mindset and so on. And once the prison service is dysfunctional and not working how it's supposed or designed to work, you will have crime continuing unabated. You will have it continuing. There's a fallacy it is a fallacy, Paul, to believe that the prison service is not an important organization in Trinidad and Tobago. That is a fallacy, an absolute fallacy. If you want crime to continue, and you can check the research, there's a lot of research on crime and criminality and the role of correctional facilities. Just go to those Scandinavian countries. Go to those Scandinavian countries where the emphasis is on treating with the correctional facilities, correctional environment, deterring, changing criminality and crime and crime intention and so on. And
You're
look at the results.
You're preaching to the choir. I've done the research.
Look at the
You're
results
preaching
there.
to the choir. But as we discussed earlier on, it is seen by politicians in Trinidad and Tobago as not valuable in terms of getting votes. And that's the bottom line.
It's not seen as attractive in that way. And it's not seen, and it's not seeing it, the citizenry does not see it through the same lens as you're seeing it, Ceron.
Because they don't live it every day.
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. That's the reality. That's the reality. At the end of the day, a politician once told us, as I told you, a politician told us under the People Partnership, under the Justice Ministry, that prisons can't help them win any election. We are interfismal in the whole scheme of things. We have no real impact on the outcome of elections, so they don't have to listen to us.
Ragoobarsingh, you would have missed this part earlier on. Ceron said less than 10% of the nation's prison facilities, and I'm surprised he said it on the air because that's frightening to me, are monitored by CCTV cameras, which is shocking to me.
It's not only just shocking, it's unacceptable, crazy, because the price of CCTV camera systems is not a formidable amount of money that you have to spend to equip prisons with that.
Yes, but you have to remember that they have to pay money to the transport inside the prison, which seems to be one of the priorities.
Yeah, because and I always wonder about that. I mean, I don't go to the prisons as much anymore, but when I used to always be concerned that where the CCTV cameras, because it seems such an obvious thing for a prison system to have CCTV cameras in not even 2022, since the 1990s. You would think that that's one place where you would have CCTV cameras because it's such a high security environment.
For example, and I just want to say this quickly, for example, when you complain about trafficking within the prison service, if you have CCTVs all over and every square inch of the prison is being monitored, that in itself will lead to crime inside the prison environment as well, because it will increase the likelihood of a person being caught committing crimes within the prison wall. It is a useful deterrence. It is a serious deterrence, right? So, but not everybody see it that way, unfortunately.
It's just an obvious. It's so obvious to the infrastructure of a prison. It's incredible. It's incredulous that it doesn't exist, and that as you were saying, less than 10%. That's incredulous. That is just a microcosmic explanation of how this prison system is valued and how it's seen.
Let me tell you what's tragic about this.
Just a perfect example of it.
I'll tell you what's tragic about this is that, and Ceron would know, I have been interviewing Ceron before he was president, and since he's president. I am so tired of these conversations. I am so tired of these same conversations over and over with past prisons commissioners, with past prison officers, with past ministers of national security, with past ministers of justice. It is so disgusting. That Daniel Kahn report, you don't even need a new prisons inspector. The Daniel Kahn report could be picked up, dusted off, and put back into the public domain with 95% of the issues still unresolved.
That's correct.
I mean, get to the point where, what is the point of even talking about it, sadly? But for the officers who have to live in it and work in it, and for the families of the inmates and those who may become victims because of the high recidivism rates, because of the lack of systemic change. It's just like, you know what? It's like, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Very frustrating, Paul. Very frustrating. Very sad too, because I mean, when we're looking at the high incidence of crime in Trinidad and Tobago, one would expect that there will be reasonable focus and abundance of focus on the areas that treat with those crimes, on the areas that could have real impact on
politicians have perfected the art of Mama Guy and old talk. They've perfected the art because they know, as I said before, most people listening here will be What the hell? What they want? They want to make them living in Hyatt. What they want? I have no water in the tap. I'm a child. I have no laptop. And you want to build a new prison. That's what you're gonna get.
Yep.
But what's the aftermath of it? And I don't think
because they don't make the connection between the
aftermath of it.
poor conditions and the increase in crime. They don't make that connection.
They don't make the connection.
Ceron,
That
it's
is it.
8:02. Thank you so much. Be safe.
Unbelievable, this interview. Unbelievable.
Thank you, Paul.
We will have it again in 6 months.
And you'll see the same thing.
We will have the same conversation in 6 months. We will just pull it up and then sleep a little late and play back the interview. And you don't have to come out again and we just play back the interview.
Okay, Paul.
We might have a different minister of national security because it seems to be rotating a revolving door. You never know. But if it's the same minister,
Oh, I say you know something we don't, Paul.
If it's the same minister, there are 3 already in 6 years. Where's your point? I have empirical evidence to support my claim, you know. If it is the same one, we will pull it up. We had Edmund Dillon, we had Stuart Young, and now we have Fitzgerald. If it's the same one, we'll just pull it up and play it back. Because that's the only thing need to change.
Okay, Paul.
Have a great day. Be safe. Buddy.
Ceron, thank you so much for being on the Power Breakfast Show this morning.
No problem. The pleasure is mine.
All the best to you. Take care.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll play back that interview, and in 6 months' time, it'll be the same thing. All right, let's get into our news brief. All courtesy Champion Auto Services.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
Ceron Richard says that prison system needs to be low or seems to be low on the list of priorities in terms of spending. He